Welcome everybody, welcome back to CJAM Sessions, or welcome for the first time for those of you who are joining us for the first time today. As you know, we have now shifted our successful 10-year long-running event Conversion Jam to the digital format, where we have these 4 sessions that last just above the hour, and diving into some really interesting topics around testing, experimentation, CRO, and growth. And usually when I'm out speaking about conversion optimization and growth and so on, I talk about kind of the 3 pillars, which are psychology, understanding what happens in the brain of the consumer, and not only guessing, but actually backing that up with data, and then finally putting all that good stuff into experiments and prove that you are actually doing the right thing. And the 2 first sessions, the first one was about the changes in consumer psychology now in the kind of a crazy world that we live in. And secondly, how we can use data going forward. And now we are at the 3rd session, so we're going to be talking about experiments, like really getting into the core of what we do. Yummy, yummy, yummy.
Yes.
And with me today, I have a new co-host, Matilda. Welcome.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. Who are you?
Hello, I'm Matilda. I'm working at Conconista as a growth manager in our fantastic advisory team.
Wow.
And I'm going to be the co-host today, and I'm going to answer some questions from the audience and answering some questions we have to our amazing speakers as well.
To our speakers, yeah.
Yes.
So welcome very much. You're a little bit new at the job here at Conversionista, so I guess that you will be now that kind of the challenger that that kind of kicks our old white guys in the behind.
For sure. Perspective from the outside.
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Check on that.
You also have some housekeeping stuff to share with us. Yeah.
I have. We have a Q&A session here at Zoom. So you all fantastic people who are listening here today, you can ask questions to our great speakers. So just go through the Q&A and ask questions as we go. And also we have a chat for everything else. That could be like, John, you're talking too fast, or where have you bought our amazing shirts, or your hair, whatever comes to mind.
The usual question is like TV hosts, do they actually are fully dressed up, or do they perform in their underwear because you can't see it?
But we won't be able to answer that.
We won't be able to answer that.
And that's why they cut the picture here. Okay. Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
But just ask everything that comes to mind, and we will answer them as we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also I have, of course, a housekeeping responsibility here, and that's my responsibility to go through the safety instructions.
Safety instructions.
So what happens if there are, like, you need to know the emergency exit or something?
Yeah, the exit. We talked about that before. So you click the exit window in Zoom. Yeah. And if there's a fire, what do we do?
Yeah. Okay. So save yourself first.
Yeah. Run like hell.
Run like hell.
We talked about that before.
Yeah, we did.
But you have some new stuff today that we thought about.
So the focus today is, of course, experiment, and that could be very exciting.
Yeah.
And if you are very excited, you're sitting very close to your computer, you have your coffee or something, remember to put it down or something, because you will maybe spill out your coffee on your computer.
Exactly.
That won't be very fun. So just remember that. Chill. Take a step back.
Yeah. Be careful with hot coffee. Very important.
Yeah,
your safety is very important to us. So we want to remind you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. No worries.
Yeah. All good. And I also want to say that we are also our partner Chameleon. They're doing like almost immediate recaps of each of the sessions. So if there's something you missed, something you want to share with your colleagues, then you should go to chameleon.com blog, and you'll find a write-up of the latest session there on their blog. So that could be a good resource for yourself and possibly share with your colleagues. Thank you, Chameleon, for helping us with this. And also, we will, of course, want to know your opinion and ideas about things. So we got the Mentimeter thing going. Please tell us about that. Yeah.
Yes. So if you have your phone or, of course, a computer you're watching from, go to menti.com and type in the code, because we have some questions for you that we want you to answer, and we will go through the answers as we go and also discuss them further along. So go to menti.com and you have the code right there. So just go in, type the code, and you will see the questions. And I will also go through the questions right now. We have 4 questions for you, guys. So the first question we have is this. Very good. Has working from home made it harder or easier for you to focus on your work? And question number 2 is, have you increased or decreased your testing in the last year? A focus question number 3 is how does the success rate in testing evolve over time? And you had some input there, right, John?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
So that ties very closely to our speaker Hajir from Optimizely, because what he did and what Optimizely did is that they went into their database and they tried to, they basically had 3 different hypotheses. It could be that in experimenters in the beginning, they pick the low-hanging fruit, and then over time, they have a much harder time to actually reaching success. So the rate of success is declining. Or it could be like we actually suck at testing in the beginning, and then once we learn the process, we actually see increasing results over time. Or it could be that it just kind of those things like kind of even out, and it's just a kind of a flat rate over time. And he actually has the answer for that question. But we would like, before we give you that answer, we would like your opinion on it. So that's why we have this question.
Yes. Exactly.
And
Thank
the 4th
you.
question.
Yeah, the 4th question is, drum roll. Yes, thank you. What are the key success factors for experimentation? Yeah, so
fantastic.
Yeah, so it's just like free for you to just answer whatever you comes to mind on that question. And so we will go through the answers and all of these words that you type in later on, so we can have a discussion regarding those.
Exactly. And you have all the time in the world, or at least like 20 minutes to fill that stuff out. Do in the background. We're just going to be chatting here and so on.
Yes.
That's awesome. And before we go into today's first speaker topic session, I want to remind you, as with the 2 previous sessions, we have the mad conversion scientist in the house, and he's going to be showing off his crazy conversion gadget inventions. So that's going to be right at the end. If you don't want to miss that, don't go away before that happens at the very end of this session. So just a friendly reminder to save the date with your mad conversion scientist.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
It is. Yeah, I'm excited too. Yeah. So with that, let's go to our first speaker. We got with us today an amazing author, all the way from Singapore, Nir. Welcome to the show today.
Oh, it's great to be here with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. For those of you that don't know Nir, he's a best-selling author of the book Hooked, on which he spoke when you were presenting at the live Conversion Jam a couple of years ago. Actually, one of our top-rated sessions of all times. I thought it was immensely enjoyable. But the good news is that you're out with a new book, and it's called Indistractable. It looks like this. So it basically teaches individuals, organizations, families, how to become indistractable. I guess the word in itself is pretty self-explanatory. Now, all you people that are listening today, if you want to get this book, or if you want to get access to a lot of extra resources that you can get from Nir, go to nirandfar.com, where you can get a copy of the book, and you can get access to all these extra resources. So make sure you do that. And then with that, I basically want to say hello to you and like tell us a little bit about yourself before you go into my haggling the questions to you. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm a behavioral designer. So I help companies and individuals build healthy habits or break bad habits. So I work with all kinds of companies in the enterprise product space. So if you think about SaaS products, if they want to build good habits in order to keep people coming back, or else they'll churn out. So I work with many SaaS products. I work with healthcare products, fintech, edtech, any product that needs a habit is the kind of product that I'll work with. And I've taught at the Stanford Graduate School of Business and later at the Hasso Plattner Institute of Design. And my first book, Hooked, was about how to build habit-forming products to build good habits. My second book, as you mentioned, thank you so much, is called Indistractable, How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life. And that's all about how to break bad habits, specifically those habits that involve distraction.
Okay, cool. Well, as I said, I read the book twice, one of them listening to it. So I'm trying, but Nir, do you have any good idea? I'm trying to come up with a verb that would actually capture either reading or listening to a book. You can just say it, and then like the channel of consumption would be like a non-issue. I'm trying to crack that one.
Absorbing.
What? Absorbing. Okay, I've absorbed the book 2 times. And the first thing, and of course, like how I absorbed it was through this thing, and I did it also on my earphones. So that's technology. But actually, A lot of people say that this technology is bad for us. There are so many studies about teenagers and kids and grown-ups and whatnots that are distracted by technology, and so that's basically the root cause of the problem that we are seeing today. I would say that you didn't 100% agree with that statement in your book. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, to be clear, I'm certainly not an apologist for the industry. If you don't like using these tools, I think you should find ways to use them less. But what I don't appreciate is this scientific, pseudoscientific garbage that tells people they're addicted to technology, that it's hijacking their brains, that there's nothing they can do. It's ridiculous. The scientific community doesn't agree with this at all. And in fact, I think this message is incredibly disempowering, that we have the power to put these technologies in their place. Look, these products are good. They're not that good, right? Like, yeah. I know exactly all their tips and tricks. I wrote the book on how they get you hooked. And I will tell you, of course, these products are designed to be engaging. That's what we use them for. Are we going to tell Netflix, hey, please stop making your shows so interesting? Apple, stop making your devices so user-friendly. That's ridiculous. We want these products to be engaging. So it's really going to be up to us as consumers to find ways to get the best out of these technologies without letting them get the best of us. And that's the empowering message that's in Indistractable.
Right. So then if it isn't the technology that's the root cause, then where do we find, like, let's zoom in on the root cause. What is the root cause of distractibility, or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, so this is really why I wrote the book. You know, there's a phrase that you teach best what you most need to learn. And I was incredibly distracted a few years ago. I found that I was really having trouble focusing on the things that were important to me in life. The genesis of the book occurred a few years after I'd written Hooked. I started becoming, busier for my work and more speaking engagements and consulting work. And I found that what I really wanted to do with my time and attention, writing, was slipping. I wasn't able to focus like I used to. And then there was one event that really kind of re-emphasized the importance of being able to be indistractable, which was I was with my daughter one afternoon, and we had this beautiful day planned, just spending some quality time together. And I remember we had this book of activities that dads and daughters could do together. And one of the activities in the book was to ask each other this question: if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you want? And I remember the question, but I don't remember what my daughter said, because in that moment, for whatever reason, I started checking my phone. And by the time I looked up from my device, my daughter was gone. She'd left the room because I was sending a very clear message that whatever was on my phone was more important than she was. And it didn't just happen with my daughter. It would happen at work. When I would sit down, I'd say, oh, I'm going to work on that big project. I'm going to focus. Nothing's going to get in my way. And yet I'd start checking email or Slack channels or doing 100 different things that weren't the thing I said I was going to do. It would happen when I would tell myself, I'm definitely going to exercise and eat right. And yet I didn't, and I wouldn't. So that's when I really wanted to understand this age-old question, which, by the way, Plato, the philosopher, asked 2,500 years ago. He asked, why do we do things against our better interests? If we know what to do, why don't we just do it? And so if the problem is something that people articulated 2,500 years before the internet, the root cause can't be technology, because people have always been struggling with distraction. So I wanted to go deeper than this surface level analysis that just blames the latest tech trends and gets people inside a moral panic, and really look at the deeper psychology of why we get distracted. And what I discovered was that only 10% of our distractions, 10%, are caused by external triggers. What are external triggers? External triggers are the pings, the dings, the rings, all the things in your outside environment that can lead you off track. This is what people tend to blame. But it turns out that's only 10% of the time that you get distracted. Is it because of something outside of you? So what's the other 90%? I discovered that 90% of the time you get distracted, it's not because of what's happening outside of you, but rather what's happening inside your own head. That 90% of the time that we get distracted because of what's called an internal trigger. An internal trigger is an uncomfortable emotional state that we seek to escape from. Loneliness, fatigue, anxiety, stress, uncertainty, boredom. These feelings are what we constantly seek to escape through our distraction. So whether it's too much news, too much booze, too much Facebook, too much football, we are always going to find a way to escape that emotional discomfort unless we understand what's going on and begin to master those internal triggers, or they will become our masters.
Oh wow! I just when I listen to this, I just feel like like it's it just comes to you. You're it's like yes, check, yes, check, yes, check. I do all that, and then you're teaching us how to do it, but it's still such a struggle to actually get there. Would you like to perhaps evolve a little bit on like the part of the book where you talk about mastering internal triggers and like how you actually can manage those internal triggers and actually don't fall prey to their power, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the most important step. So most people, when it comes to distraction, they tend to fall into two camps. We call them the blamers or the shamers, right? The blamers, when they get distracted, they say, oh, it's my boss, it's Facebook, it's the news, it's all this stuff outside of me. And of course, that's pointless because blaming those things outside of you can't go back to some mythical age before these things existed. Distraction has always been with us. So being a blamer doesn't make much sense. The same goes for the opposite end of the spectrum, what we call the shamers. The shamers, when they get distracted, they don't blame things outside themselves. They blame themselves. They go inside. This is what I used to do. Oh, I'm no good at time management. I have a short attention span. There must be something wrong with me. No, there's nothing wrong with you. It's simply that you haven't learned the skills to deal with distraction, to deal with these uncomfortable emotional states in a healthy way that leads you towards traction rather than distraction. So being a shamer or a blamer is pointless. Blamers blame things outside themselves. Shamers, they shame themselves. And of course, ironically, the more shame we feel, that's an uncomfortable emotional state. What do we do when we feel uncomfortable emotional states? We look for even more distractions. So that doesn't work either. What we have to be is not a blamer or a shamer, but a claimer. What does a claimer do? A claimer claims responsibility not for how they feel. Okay, this is a common misconception. You do not control your urges or your feelings. If you have that urge to check email or smoke a cigarette or eat that chocolate cake if you're on a diet, you don't control that urge. You don't control that feeling. Just like you don't control the urge to sneeze, right? If you feel the urge to sneeze, you already felt that urge. It's too late. You have no control over it. What you do have control over is how you will respond to that urge, hence the term responsibility. So when you feel that discomfort of wanting to sneeze, do you sneeze all over everyone? Or do you take out a tissue and cover your face and do the responsible thing and make sure you don't get other people sick? Well, of course, you do the responsible thing. And the same goes to our distractions. It's all about recognizing those urges, that itch, that uncomfortable emotional state, and as opposed to trying to escape it, rather learning tactics to claim responsibility for those sensations so that you control them as opposed to letting them control you. And there's dozens of different techniques to use that I cite from acceptance and commitment therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. You don't have to actually go to a physician to use these techniques. These are non-pharmaceutical solutions that any one of us can use right now to help us focus and become indistractable.
Right. Oh, there's hope after all.
Yes, it is. Nice to hear.
More than hope. I'll tell you, we are stronger. I mean, this is the perception. The perception is that these companies are controlling us, and it's BS. It's not true. We are far more powerful than these companies if we know what to do, because the antidote to impulsiveness is forethought. Fundamentally, this is about impulsiveness. It's that urge. It's that itch. So if we can learn to pause in that space and take actions that lead us towards traction rather than distraction, this is where our powers lie, and we are way more powerful than any of these technology companies.
It's good to hear. So one of the concepts that is in the book is the idea of making room for traction. So that I would say, like, in my kind of amateur view on this, I think that I'm actually, like, when we spoke about this before, I think that actually a lot of those like external triggers that you were talking about, I'm actually pretty good at shutting off all the notifications and all those things, like to the point where people can be pissed at me because they can't get a hold of me because I just don't pay attention to stuff like that. But then, so for me, like the next step would be like this idea of making room for traction would be the most powerful. That's what I felt personally for me. So could you please tell us a little bit about making room for traction?
Sure. So let's start by defining what distraction is. So most people, if you ask them what's the opposite of distraction, they'll tell you the opposite of distraction is focus, right? We don't want to be distracted. We want to be focused. But that's not exactly right. That if you look at the origin of the word, the opposite of distraction is not focus. The opposite of distraction is traction. Traction and distraction come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull. And you'll notice that both words end in the same 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N. That spells action. reminding us that distraction is not something that happens to us. It is an action we take. So traction is any action that pulls you towards what you said you were going to do, things you do with intent, things that move you closer to your values and help you become the kind of person you want to become. Those are acts of traction. The opposite of traction is distraction, anything that moves you away from what you plan to do. So this is super important. This isn't just semantics, because I would argue any action can be traction or distraction based on one word, and that one word is forethought. So we need to stop moralizing and medicalizing how people spend their time. We say, oh, if you're playing video games or Facebook, that's bad. But me watching football on TV, that's okay. Why? Any way you want to spend your time. I don't care how you spend your time. You want to play video games all day? You want to meditate? You want to go on walks? You want to paint? You want to stare at the ceiling? Do it. Do it. But do it with intent. Do it based on your values and on your schedule, not someone else's. Conversely, anything can be distraction. So what happens to many of us, especially in the conversion rate business, we are so busy all the time with all these things that we need to get done, this mile-long to-do list, which, by the way, running your life on a to-do list is one of the worst things you can do for your personal productivity. And we fool ourselves into thinking we're working on productive stuff, right? I've got that big project, but I don't feel like working on it right now. So let me just check email for a few minutes. How many times a day does that happen to us, right? We know we need to do that hard project, the big important stuff, but let me do this small, easy stuff because that's work related, right? Checking Slack channels, email, that's a work task, right? Wrong. It's just as much of a distraction, maybe even worse of a distraction than playing some silly video game, because you don't even realize you got distracted. And so if we are going to do the hard and important work that we have to do to move our lives and career forward, we have to make sure that we recognize that anything that is not what you plan to do is a form of distraction, even the work-related stuff.
Yeah, I went. I think a personal learning that I had. As some of you people might know that see this, I went away to Australia for 15 months to be there with my family, basically. But I got a job there as well at a company similar to Conversionista, and that company was all the time very, very busy. It's like when you ask people about how things were, it's like, oh, it's so busy this week. I mean, it's crazy. And I was working so much. And so all the time, so I spent a year there, and all the time people would say like how incredibly busy they were. And they were always saying like, because of this project, because of this deadline, because of this. And I was like, I took a step back and I said like, these guys are busy all the time. It's not because of the project, not because of deadline. It's just the culture and the way that this company operates. So then I decided after that, I think that's one of the things that you bring up about like how you identify yourself. So I try to now more identify myself as not being so busy. So when people ask me about like, there's like this tendency, like slentrian, we call it in Swedish. It's like when people ask you like, how are things, busy, all right? And you go like, yeah, oh man, this week was like really busy. So I try and more answer like, oh, it's been pretty chill. It's like, it's not too, I'm getting along. This is a good week. So I try to not fall into the pitfall of like portraying myself as busy all the time. And I think that's one of the things that then I actually did this first, and then I read your book, and then I thought like, yeah, that actually, I think I might be on the right way. What do you think? Am I on the right way?
No, I mean, there's a very important reason why I titled the book Indistractable. I coined the term. So when you make up a new word, you can use it to define anything you want. And so what does it mean to be indistractable? Being indistractable doesn't mean you never get distracted. That's impossible. All of us get distracted from time to time. The difference is that distractible people constantly get distracted by the same things again and again. There's a wonderful quote by Paulo Coelho. He said, a mistake repeated more than once is a decision. A mistake repeated more than once is a decision. How many times do we get distracted by the same things again and again and again before we say enough? Enough. Distracted people choose to be distracted because they don't do anything about the problem. Indistractable people say, I see what you did there. Okay, I got distracted once, but I'm going to do something today to prevent getting distracted tomorrow. Because every distraction only has one of three causes: an internal trigger, an external trigger, or a planning problem. That's it. Every distraction is always from one of those three things. So once you understand this model, you can do something about it. And one of the techniques, as you mentioned, is having an identity, right? Is having a moniker. By calling yourself busy all the time, you're driving yourself crazy. You never get to enjoy leisure. It's incredible how few people out there have ever come home and truly relaxed, right? Because they use these outdated techniques like running their life on a to-do list. And even when they have leisure time to enjoy with their family, to watch a movie, to play a video game, to enjoy themselves. They're thinking, oh, there's 100 things I still haven't done on my to-do list. It's a terrible technique, right? It's not that they're broken, it's that this technique is stupid. As opposed to when you become indistractable, when that becomes your mantra, when that becomes your identity, it's not about, constantly trying to do everything. It's about doing what I say I was going to do for as long as I would without distraction.
Good. I get in the weekends, I get easily I get easily distracted from my to-do list, actually. So I always wake up to this idea. I would go through all this boring admin stuff that I should take care of. But then I'm out there and my son, he's playing with some Lego, some models. And then I feel like, no, I actually want to be more with him. So I just drop the to-do list. So I have a positive distraction there sometimes in the weekend.
Good way. Okay, so just throwing out the to-do list. That's one key to do it.
Yeah, I just ignore it.
Not necessarily. It's not running your life with a to-do list,
Okay.
right?
That's a
So if
difference.
you wake up in the morning and you look at your to-do list and not your calendar, that's the mistake, right? Because if you run your life on a to-do list, that's the problem. Getting things out of your head and onto a list is great, but you have to put that time on your calendar. So if you want to have time with your son, I have time with my daughter every week. I have big old plans of time with her. Every weekend we have like 4 hours together. Yeah. I don't know what we're going to do. We call this planned spontaneity, but I have that time on my calendar so I can enjoy it without guilt. I'm not thinking about what I still have to do. The only thing I have to do is be fully present with my daughter. I don't have to pick up my phone. I don't have to check social media. I have to look at email. What I plan to do is to enjoy that time because that's what I said I was going to do.
Great. Let's go into that. I think we got just enough time for one more subject, and I think this is probably the one that is maybe more difficult to answer, but like very dear to me because we have these people that are joining today that are in digital teams, digital marketing teams, experimentation team, growth teams like you're working with, and so on, and they're now in a constant battle to be understood and to be heard within the upper management, also with their peers in the company. Like you got this little growth team here, and we over here in procurement, we have absolutely no idea what you're doing. Like, why should you even exist? It seems like what you're doing is costing a lot of money, and then when they're trying to focus at work, I think that the key takeaway that I got from the book was that for teams and in organization, the most important factor is what is called psychological safety, that you can feel secure in what you're doing, and that would be you talk about a lot of other things as well, but that is the number one. So would you like to explain that a little bit for us, how that works, what it is, and what it does for teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So half the book is about things that you can do yourself, right? How can you become indistractable? But let's not be so naive to not acknowledge that much of what we do is defined by our environment, right? Where we work, who we work with, the other people in our life make a huge difference. So half the book is about what you can do personally. The other half of the book is about things that you can do for your environment. So how to have an indistractable relationship, how to raise indistractable kids, and how to build an indistractable workplace. So what I found in my 5 years of research is that there are 3 criteria for an indistractable workplace. And we see this, I profile many companies. Ironically, one of the companies is Slack, right? So Slack was rated as one of the most distracting products out there. People constantly say, by the way, email is the #1 most distracting technology. Number 2 is Slack or some other group messaging service. So I actually went to Slack headquarters and I expected to see that these people were crazy distracted because they make this technology that people think is so distracting. So if anybody should be distracted by the technology of Slack, it should be them if that's what's causing the distraction. But that's not what I found at all. That in fact, Slack, the company, doesn't struggle with this problem. Why? Because they exemplify these 3 qualities of an indistractable company. Number 1, psychological safety. That if you can't talk about this problem of distraction, that is the problem. The fact that you can't talk about it because you don't have what's called psychological safety. Psychological safety is when you can raise your hand and say, hey, you know what? I'm not able to do my best work when I'm constantly interrupted every 30 seconds. I can't do my best work. If you fear getting fired, if you raise that concern, that's the problem. And I guarantee you there's 100 other skeletons in the closet as well. So number 1 is psychological safety. People need to feel like they can talk about the problem. Number 2 is that you have to provide a forum to talk about this problem. So at Slack, it's fascinating. They actually use Slack to give people a place to talk about these problems. They have a Slack channel called Beef Tweets, which is where people talk about their beef with the company, the things they don't like at the company. And management will use emoji, Okay, get this. They use emoji to tell their colleagues that the message has been seen. They use the eye emoji or a check mark if it's been resolved. Not necessarily to tell people, hey, every complaint we're going to fix. Sometimes all it takes is just acknowledging, okay, we heard that. We're going to take that into consideration. So giving people a forum to talk about this problem. And then third, and most importantly, is that management needs to exemplify what it means to be indistractable. So when you go to Slack corporate headquarters, in the canteen, right, where everybody gets together for lunches together, you will see a huge neon sign that says work hard and go home. Okay, work hard and go home. That is not something you would expect in a hard charging tech company. Why? Because everybody in the company, from the CEO on down, believes that people do their best work when they have time to go away and think about things for a while and work without distraction. So the biggest source of distraction in these companies, it's not the young junior employees that people think are so tech literate. When I go do my consulting work and I'll go give a big presentation on how to become indistractable, it's the boss in the back of the room who's so important they have to constantly be checking email. And then everybody in the room is like secondhand smoke. When you see one person checking email, well, now everybody's checking email. And now we have what we call a zombie meeting, where we have warm bodies in the room, but there's no brains because the brains are somewhere else. So why are we meeting? Right? You see this double when it comes to online meetings as well. So it's really about those three criteria. And the good news is any company can become an indistractable company.
I think I've been talking. We were talking about having a meeting for a meeting, but I never heard the term zombie meeting for. That's good. I'm gonna pick up on
use
that.
100%.
Too many zombie meetings.
Yeah.
We're getting near the end of the session, and we asked the attendees a question. So before we get the answer from the attendees, I would like to ask you this question. In your experience, now with the pandemic and people working from home, we asked this question: has working from home made it harder or easier for you to focus on your work? What do you think people answer there? Harder or easier?
I think it's different. And this is what we're seeing in surveys, that it used to be that when we polled people before the pandemic, what are the greatest sources of distraction in the workplace? Number one was not technology, it was people, right? Your boss coming by your desk and saying, hey, can I get that TPS report? Your colleague stopping by and saying that bit of office gossip. Other people were the number one form of distraction. Well, today, working from home, it's not your colleagues, it's your kids. It's your roommate, it's your spouse that are causing these distractions. So they've changed. I think the other thing that's changed is that the level of internal triggers, right? The uncertainty because of the state of the world, the fear, the stress that this pandemic has caused, and of course the knock-on effects for people's jobs, this has heightened how much we experience these internal triggers. So when people feel these internal triggers, what do? They look for escape. They drink more, they smoke more, they eat more, they get distracted more. So certainly, I think in many ways, it's changed the conditions that people operate under and potentially made it harder to stay focused, which is why it's even more important we have to learn these skills now.
Okay. So, Matilda, what's the answer from our audience?
The answer is actually that we are tending heavier on the easier. And maybe that's like a reflection of what you said, Nir. You're talking about the boss coming knocking on the shoulder. We're often sitting in this like open language, like lounge kind of seating at the offices. Maybe that's one of the reasons that they're tending to on the easier to like focus on your work. But then looking into the other like things that you mentioned, Nir, like how much focus or how easier can you like zoom out for your work and do stuff outside. Maybe that will like the question or the answer will differ from that. But what's your reflection, Nir, when you see the answer tends to be easier?
Yeah, in many ways, I think what happens when we work from home, it is easier in many ways to block out. I think it's because of the type of people we're surveying. There's definitely a survey bias for certain type of jobs do find it easier to work from home. So if you're on your computer all day doing focused work, it is easier because you're on your screen at work, you're on your screen at home, but at home you don't have your boss and your colleagues constantly interrupting you. So it would make sense for this group for folks to find it easier, which is great.
Okay, all good. We actually are at the end of this session, so thank you so much for joining us all the way from Singapore. So I wish you a very nice end of the day. How much is remaining of your day? I don't know, just a few hours or something like that. Thank you for joining. It's very kind. And for all you people out there, if you want to find out the book and the workbooks and the other resources, you go to Nir and Far com. And basically, one thing I would like to suggest, because I follow you on LinkedIn, and you're one of the few people that actually does post a lot of really valuable stuff on LinkedIn, and not the usual yada yada. So if you forgot the URL, you just go and follow Nir on LinkedIn. I think that's where I get most of my inspiration from your part of the world.
I appreciate it. Great to see you, and have a great rest of the session.
Okay, thank you very much.
Nir.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Wow, super interesting.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
And
zombie meetings. I will use that, especially digitally. Turning off camera, turning off microphone.
Yeah.
Is somebody there? Is somebody alive?
Nobody
knows.
Let's not hope this turns into a zombie event.
Remember that you can ask the questions. You still have the Q&A and the chat. So just please type in everything that you feel like asking us or our fantastic speakers.
Great. With that, let's move to the next speaker, who is Hajir from Optimizely.
Hi there. Good to see you, John.
Hey. Yeah, and so it's just to clarify for the audience, you are not with Nir in Singapore, even though you have the same background. Yeah.
You bought the same curtains, or?
It is a complete coincidence.
Yeah, you got the same interior designer working for you. Okay. Yeah, you're in the Netherlands. It makes it
look like I just walked off the stage.
Exactly. Yeah. So Hajir, you're from our partner Optimizely, and please tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I've been in the experimentation space for about 7-8 years now. As a consultant, I've advised lots of companies on experimentation, but one of my big passions has been research. So I've actually co-authored scientific research with Harvard on experimentation, and I'm actually working on 4 papers right now. And so a big part of what I've been doing is really to bring that strategy, but also understanding of what it takes for people to really get great at experimentation, and trying to spread that with more people to really jumpstart this cultural change.
That's amazing. We got just the right guy here.
Yep.
And we have, before I let you come in and tell us all the details and all the facts and everything that we need to know, we want to go back to the answers that we got from the Mentimeters too, because you have some of the answers in your research. So we just kind of want to compare that with the answers we got from the audience. So we are going to show you the answers from to the Mentimeter questions 2 and 3. Matilda?
Yeah. Okay, so the first or the second question we had, was that if you have increased or decreased your testing in the last year, and you can see the answer right now. So it tends to be like somewhere in the middle, but maybe leaning more towards people have increased their testing in the last year. Yeah,
there's a big hump there. Haven't changed much.
Yeah. It is.
Okay.
It is, and
with Optimizely go. We've seen some increase in experimentation across our customer base. Differs a bit by industry, but we find as a whole companies are looking to pivot and adapt to a lot of unforeseen changes.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And then the
question number 3 that we discussed before, if the success rate of testing over time is...
Yeah.
So we asked the people to see if they are increasing, constant, or decreasing, and you have the answer to this, right?
Yeah, but we're not going to spoil it for you. But what people are saying is that the majority says it's constant, and with a slight bias towards increasing if you at the decreasing there. So with that, we're just going to leave that. You're going to get back to the subject in your presentation, and then we just basically give the screen to you and Amsterdam and take it away.
Thank you, John. Well, I think the audience is actually quite accurate in a lot of these assessments. I think when we look at experimentation, it's something we've been researching for quite a while. And so the subject of my talk is called The Science of Testing Right, because I feel as much as we talk about the importance of science and experimentation, there's far too little research on what really makes programs perform better than others. Much of the advice we've taken on has come from other people influenced in the space, those who've got a big name or a brand, but rarely have it really shown through data what it takes to get better at this craft. And so that's been a huge passion of mine. It actually began with major research I conducted back in 2017, where I actually did a benchmark of over 100,000 experiments and 1,000 of our customers at Optimizely to really understand what are the differences in company behavior, what really shapes people's success and futures. From there, at one of the great privileges of my career, I got to co-author a scientific paper with Professor Stefan Tomke and PhD candidate Sourav Ghosh at Harvard Business School, And our paper, The Effects of Hierarchy on Learning and Performance in Business Experimentation, was actually also an award-winning paper at the Academy of Management. And so it's a huge chance for us to really understand how do we take the best knowledge of the business researchers and scientists, and how do we apply that to experimentation to really bring our understanding of testing to a higher level. And there's actually 5 more scientific papers I'm currently working on, but one that I'll be talking about today is a paper that's still in progress with a PhD candidate at Stanford called The Role of Success and Failure in Iteration. And it's really an analysis of how companies take risks and what it means for their success in the long term. And this paper in particular actually answers the question that we asked the audience today, which is, do people get better or worse at testing over time? Now, a lot of people believe that if you have your gut feel and you test over and over, the process of repetition makes you better at testing. But it's something we actually wanted to research. Is that actually true? How do we learn to learn? Do our experiments get better or worse over time? So if you think about this, there's 3 possible options. Either people's performance gets better over time, and so you would see accelerating returns. People's likelihood to win per experiment increases, and the tail end of the returns are bigger than the start. It's also possible the results are more constant. We see consistent returns. We get neither better nor worse, and we just have a steady state of growth over time. And lastly, there's a scenario of diminishing returns, where actually we start with a certain level of growth, but as we run more experiments over time, we see a decrease in the performance of our experiments. Now, most of the audience was actually saying that consistent returns was the most likely outcome, followed by accelerating returns, and then lastly, diminishing. I think that's actually good because consistent returns are very common in our customer base, and accelerating returns are something that far too few people are able to achieve, but it's something we've researched to a great extent. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share with you the data. Now, we actually thought about how does the performance of an experimentation team evolve over time? Now, this is analysis that we're conducting with Stanford's Graduate School of Business, and we looked at 76,000 experiments from nearly 1,600 companies. And we looked at their performance in their first quarter and up to 3 years out. And we asked ourselves, what happens to their performance? Do people get better or worse at testing over time? And to really answer this question, you need to think about this on 2 levels. Because first of all, there's a question of how likely are your experiments to win? When you look at the starting win rate of your experiments, that means the likelihood to drive a statistically significant uplift on a primary metric. Is that increasing or decreasing? Who gets better? Who gets worse? But it's not just about how likely experiments are to win, because some companies have low success rates on their tests, but the winners are absolutely massive. So the second question is, what is the average uplift on your tests? When you are driving that success, what is it worth to you? And we find that in aggregate, most companies actually balance out on these 2. Some companies have really high success rate on their tests, but because they're so risk averse, when they win, the uplifts are tiny and they average out. And some companies have experiments that win rarely because they're highly risk prone, but when they win, they have huge breakthroughs. And so we wanted to know across both of these metrics, what is the pattern for most companies? What we find first when we look at how likely experiments are to win, however good a company is in their first month is strongly predictive of their performance 3 years out. In essence, when we look at most companies around the world, however well you're testing now is likely how well you're testing 3 years from now. And that's not just something that we see in the success rate of experimentation. It is also something we see when we look at the uplifts. Because over time, the types of uplifts and winners that companies are driving stay consistent. They stay the same. Now, there's really good news to this, because that means a lot of people are afraid of diminishing returns. They're afraid if I test out over a long period of time, the low-hanging fruit is plucked. Over time, the experiment uplifts become smaller, or we are too mature and we need to go somewhere else. And this is something that is just patently and empirically untrue. If we look at companies like Booking.com, who are running hundreds of thousands of experiments over their lifetime, they are still driving massive experimentation programs. There are still returns for them to pursue. But what this also says to us is that to get better over time, you need to change the way that you are working. Most people enter into experimentation and they are typically in one mode. They run A versus B experiments that are in terms of low complexity of code, simple changes, changing text, optimizing copy, replacing images, moving buttons. And when you stay stuck in that mode, you stay stuck in that performance. So our question was, what happens to the companies who break the molds? Who are the people who are not consistently performing the same 3 years from now as they are today? Who are the ones that are truly best in class and getting better over time? And critically, what can everyone else learn about this when it comes to building a better process for developing scientific research and experimentation? So the important thing for us is we need to ask ourselves not only what makes for great experiments, but what creates a great culture of experimentation. Because to be good at experimentation, you need to build a self-improving system. That means you're perpetually asking yourself, what else can I do as a leader? What else can I do as a practitioner to keep running better tests? And so this is something we've researched in great detail. And there are two great axes to think about when it comes to how you think about your experiments, but also your culture. And so this is around how many variations we're testing side by side. Think about a typical A/B test where you're simply trying one different version of an element. Then there's a C variant where you're testing more sections of that app, a D variant where you're trying a wholly different design, and an E variant that's a shoot for the moon idea. The more variations people test, the more psychological safety they feel to take risks. Now, the second angle is really around that complexity. How big of a leap are you willing to take? Are you looking for small and incremental changes that are socially acceptable inside your company? Are you willing to go outside the bounds, ask for extra resource, and make large, meaningful changes that users see? This is fundamentally critical to the way that people test. And we can see that borne out throughout the data. So the first thing I'd point out is that the default mode of testing around the world is A/B testing. Unfortunately, that moniker has stuck and it affects the psychology of every person testing around the world. Fewer than a quarter of all experiments run worldwide have 3 or more variants. But if you zoom into these tests, you can see they are not created equal. We've separated these experiments into those that drove a significant uplift, the ones that are likely to be a winner, the ones that detected a significant reduction that kept people from implementing a loss, and lastly, the tests that were inconclusive. When you extrapolate this data, you see a very clear pattern emerge. The more variants people test, the more likely their experiments are to succeed. And this is something that we actually see on both metrics that we shared with you earlier. So this is from our research data at Optimizely, but we've actually researched this with professors at Harvard Business School, and we corrected for a lot of company characteristics, including firm performance, their seasonality, and their tech stacks. And what we found is that experiments with more variations have 2 effects. On the left-hand side, you can see they drive more significant uplifts. These experiments are more likely to win on the primary metric. But on the right-hand side, you can see that not only are they more likely to win, when they win, they detect larger breakthroughs, and the size of that uplift goes up as well. So people are more likely to succeed, and that value of that success is increasing at the same time. And now there's a fundamental reason why this is happening. I mentioned the earlier one, which is around the psychological safety, which is the more experiments you run, the more chances you have to take risks, to try something new, to learn from the experience in front of you. But just as critically, it's about ownership. When we speak to teams who are only testing 2 variations, they consistently tell us, my job is simply to measure, did this change work, yes or no? Because the strategy was designed by the CEO or the chief product officer or product director. And the testing team is simply there as a final step to make sure when this feature is implemented, is it better, is it worse, and to give an accurate measurements. But the teams that were testing 4 or 5 variations, not only were there to test that the new features were actually succeeding, they had a chance to ask themselves, what increases the likelihood of success? What is the right way to implement this feature to drive larger uplifts? And that is a fundamental mindset shift in the way teams operate. Now, teams that are testing A versus B look at testing as simply a speedometer. I'm going to drive the same route I do every single day, and I'm just asking myself, did I get there any faster? Teams who are using experimentation to test 4 or 5 variants are truly agile. They look at it as a compass. They're asking, where am I in relation to my goals, and what path do I take next? But most companies aren't willing to take that strategic risk to try many variants side by side because they're used to thinking in long-term waterfalls. They're used to thinking into a series of features and deliverables that they simply want to ship and get out the door. And when that is your mindset, it holds you back from unlocking real growth. And we see from the data consistently that the companies who test more variations drive higher success. When we advise programs on this best practice, we see that change over and over. But it's not just about testing more ideas, it's also about the quality of those ideas, and crucially, the development resources necessary to execute on them. Now, 55% of all experiments run around the world are in terms of low complexity. There are 1 to 5 lines of code per variation. And these are experiments like changing add to cart to add to basket, changing a button from red to blue. Now, the beauty of a button color test, by the way, is they very rarely win, but when they lose, you only lost a half hour of your time. They're very easy to fire and forget. But when you look at the experiments run around the world and you think about the really high complexity ones, the ones with 50 or more lines of code, they occur extremely rarely. And that is so unfortunate because when you look at the data, the likelihood for an experiment to succeed nearly doubles from the easiest to the hardest experiments. And this is fundamental. Now, Nir told us earlier that we need to become more indistractable, that it's very easy for people to have these internal triggers that cause them to quickly distract themselves by looking for other stimuli to deal with the emotions that they're having. And this is something important when you think about the design of your products, Most people think that experimentation is a chance to test the subliminal, to change copy, to tweak small elements, a font size, a background color, a hue of a button. But the problem is that people are very easily distracted. Their spouse can walk in the room, they get a message on WhatsApp, the TV commercial ends. And when you're making minute changes, the likelihood of a user noticing what you are doing is minimal. And testing the subliminal is very rarely worthwhile for the vast majority of organizations around the world. If you really want to affect that user experience, you need to make fundamental differences to how they experience your apps and websites. And to do that effectively, you need to level up to the bigger challenges that are there. Now, the good news about this is even experiments with a low level of complexity, the simple tweaks, the text changes, the image changes, they still succeed, they still win. But if you get stuck in this mode, if you are like all other testers around the world, you're starting out with A versus B experiments of a low level of complexity, and you don't break out of this mode of testing, in the long term, you will see the low-hanging fruit plucked, and you will have difficulty reaching those higher branches. So your strategy should always be the same. If you are starting out in testing and you are light on resources, use your initial successes to build the business case, to get more engineering capacity, to tackle larger experiments, and to build the confidence, the track record, and the psychological safety you need to go after bigger and bolder ambitions. And what I'd recommend to all of you is screenshot this slide and share this with your boss, because this is one of the best arguments that you will have in getting more engineering capacity, because you can literally see the more engineers are there to support you on your team, the more impact you drive, the better the returns for the business. And that's something everybody needs to be aware of. Now, we've looked at this with Harvard and we found the exact same pattern there as well, which is that the more complex tests were, the more likely that there was to drive a significant uplift. And not only that, the size of the uplifts went up as well. So it's a consistent pattern that emerges over and over. For people to really get better at testing, they need to look at this on multiple axes, giving yourself the freedom and a psychological safety to test more ideas side by side, but just as critically, to ensure that you also have the resource to tackle bigger and bolder visions. Most people around the world test simple and small experiments because it's easy, and easy is great for a variety of simple problems. But you will periodically face issues on your website, problems with your user experience that simple experiments cannot solve. And when you see those challenges, you need to tackle them head on. And that means giving yourself the space, the room, and the resources to tackle them in a comprehensive manner. Now, I want to dive into the research paper that we actually published with Harvard Business School last year. And so our paper begins with a very bold question. Do senior managers help or hurt business experiments? Now, this is a fundamental question because all of you have heard the phrase the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion. And the idea that people have in the experimentation space is that the more senior the person involved in testing, the harder it is for a program to be successful because hierarchy takes over the democratic process. People are suddenly forced to try the ideas of the loudest or the strongest or the most influential person in the room instead of the bottoms up best idea. So we wanted to measure this. What happens to the performance of teams as more and more senior people are involved? And we thought about seniority and levels. The most senior teams had a score of 6. That meant somebody at the C level was involved. A score of 5 was a VP, a 4 was a director, 3 was a senior manager, a 2 a manager, and a 1 would be an analyst or an associate. And what we found was that with each level of higher seniority, you saw 2 effects happen. The first was the more senior the stakeholders that were involved in testing, the more likely experiments are to win. And so this is really interesting because hippos oftentimes come in, they tell us, hey, you know what? There's an idea that I have. I've seen this work in the past. We need to simply run this. And they might circumvent the experimentation process, but often they are right. Their tests and their best practice experiences do hold some merits. But the problem is that with each level of seniority, the size of the uplifts becomes smaller. And this is the fundamental tension in getting hippos involved. Hippos do have that past experience in many cases, more often than not. They do know from prior companies, prior experiments that they've run, that there are new or there are old product design choices that would be an improvement over the status quo. But the problem is when they know that they have an improvement over the status quo and they end the debate there. They tell everyone else, you don't need to test alternatives. You don't need to try that C or that D variant because I already know this is going to work. And that is a limited mindset. The belief, because I already know what happens, I don't need to grow. I don't need to get better at it. I don't need to see if there's a higher performing alternative. When junior teams are running experiments, their tests don't win as often, but when they win, the size of that uplift is bigger because they're not asking themselves, what is a great idea that seemed really good 5 years ago? They're asking themselves, what is the best choice in front of me right now? And they're willing to take that risk. So this is something fundamental that people around the world can learn from. And so one of the critical places that I want to start is really, what are the challenges and the benefits of hierarchy? Because you have to really think about the power of experimentation and what that means for the psychological process. So hierarchy has three effects on people as they climb higher and higher in the ranks that limits them from being truly successful. The first is, the more senior people are, the more likely they are to overestimate their ability to influence the future. They believe that because they've had so much good experience in the past, it's somewhat predictive of what's happening next. That survivorship bias is built into them. And not only that, they have maladaptive experiences. Because they've had great experience in the past, they use decision criteria that were good 3, 5, or 10 years ago, but they are no longer best practice today, and they're steadily getting out of date. And the third and the most important one, absolutely critical to experimentation. The more senior you are, the less likely you are to revise opinions in the face of conflicting data. Now, this is mind-blowing. What it's essentially telling us is that senior decision makers have some of the strongest biases, preventing them from revising their point of view when they see an experiment that disagrees with what they've outlined. And a great example of that comes from a paper from Professor Dan Kane from Yale University, who wrote in 2013 a paper called Numeracy and Enlightened Self-Governance, that the way people answer an experiment said a lot about their math skills, but also their biases. And so what the scientific paper did, and I want you to all look at this, is they asked hundreds of participants a simple question. They showed them this experiment results at the top, where participants either used a new skin cream or they didn't use a skin cream. And there are only two outcomes. Either the rash got better or the rash got worse. You converted or you didn't. And the question to the participants was very simple. Look at this table and tell me, should you use the skin cream or should you not? Take a moment, read the table, and think for yourself, would you use the skin cream, yes or no, based off these experiment results? Now, you're all CRO practitioners, so I expect the majority of you to get this right. Now, the interesting thing is, the correct answer depends on a very simple thing. Can you figure out the ratio? When you look at the percentage likelihood of your rash getting better, patients who did not use a skin cream had an 84% chance. Patients who did use a skin cream had a 75% chance, which meant that those who used the skin cream were more likely to get worse. You should not use the skin cream. Now, who is most likely to get this question correct? If you got this answer right, most likely you're good at math. If you got this question incorrectly, most likely you struggled a bit at math in the past. And that's what the data shared. They had every single participant take a survey that revealed their political leanings, but also had them answer a series of math questions. And the better you were at math, the more likely you were to get this question right. Now, here's where the paper gets really interesting. And this says so much about experimentation, but also our political process. Because they took the exact same math problem, the exact same table, the exact same ratios, but they changed the question from skincare to gun control. What happens when you ban concealed handguns in public versus do not ban concealed handguns in public? And just to be very clear, they tried this in both directions. They flipped the increase in crime and the decrease in crime to give people with both leanings a chance to be correct or incorrect half the time. And what they found was absolutely fascinating. What they found was that the strongest predictor of whether you're able to get this question correctly was no longer your math skills, but your political affiliation. If you politically agreed, you're most likely to be correct. If you politically disagreed, you're most likely to be incorrect. But now a question to all of you in the audience. What effect does math skill have on your ability to get this question right? What the data actually shares is the better you are in math, the more likely you are to get the question incorrect if you disagree. This is the most fascinating part. You would think being good at math makes it easier for you to revise your opinion in the face of conflicting data. But what the data actually tells us is you're more likely to protect your own emotions, to shield yourself from negative stimuli that challenge your identity, your political beliefs. And so those who are bad at math were actually more likely to revise their opinion in the face of conflicting data. The exact same is true in experimentation. When senior decision makers feel their identity, their status inside the business, their position as those having superior product knowledge and roadmap ideas is challenged by an experiment, they're less likely to revise their opinions, because just like how those who are good at math have more opportunities to defend themselves and find excuses for why they disagree with the data, those in a position of authority or seniority in a team have more opportunities to influence and pressure others to keep themselves from having to adapt. And so the data tells us that we really need to have a true growth mindset. And I think nobody exemplifies this better than this wonderful quote from David Fishmans from Booking.com. And he says, you need to ask yourself two big questions. How willing are you to be confronted every day by how wrong you are? And how much autonomy are you willing to give to the people who work for you? If the answer is you don't like to be proven wrong and you don't want the employees to decide the future of your products, it's not going to work. This is the fundamental thing that everybody can learn about experimentation. If we want to get better at our craft, we need to constantly expose ourselves to likely to be proven wrong. We need to constantly think about how to self-improve our systems. And there are many axes that we can improve these on. We focus on experimentation quality today, but what we work on with our customers is really on all levels, helping people increase the scale by testing across more channels and properties, helping them increase the scope, knowing exactly where the money is, testing on cost levers, profitability, focusing on the quality, better research and ideation, complex tests, and more variants for experiments, but also executing better, making sure you implement faster, you fuel bottlenecks in a program, and you mitigate the risks of highly complex strategy decisions. All these best practices collectively make people far better at experimentation. But fundamental to all these is that you're able to look in the mirror, admit what you know, feel that ambition that you can change the world, but the humility to realize you're still very far off from getting there, and you need to change and grow in the process. Thank you.
I'm like, wow, clapping.
Yeah,
I wish I could find something smart to say,
Yeah.
but I'm just kind of sucking it in. I think that's it took us through some very, very interesting facts. I think the last slide was very fast, but for the audience, we'll share that afterwards, so you can look at those pillars. But let's just go over to the couch here, because we got our next guest here, and so there's a bit of Q&A. And Matilda,
Yeah.
can you still ask questions?
Yeah, of course. You can still ask questions. So please just write whatever question you have to our guest speakers, and we will be able to answer them during the Q&A session.
Yeah. Okay. Good. With
There's
that, let's
still time.
head over and sit down with Martin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's do it.
Hey,
Martin.
Wow.
What a sick.
Super interesting there. Yeah.
So,
Right.
Martin, you're new here in the studio.
Yes.
You are from NetOnNet. Please tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Why are you here?
Well, I'm here because I'm interested in this area, of course, and
Great.
and who I am. I'm the head of e-commerce at NetOnNet,
Right.
and I've been there for a little over 3 years. And for those of you who don't know NetOnNet as a company, we're in the home electronic business,
Right.
Retailer, one of the biggest in Sweden, and we also have operations in Norway.
Right. Good. And the reason why we invited you was that you're also doing we like Conversionista and the group wherein we do a bit of work with you, so we have some insights into what you're doing, and you've performed extremely well during the pandemic, where we see a lot of retailers that are pretty happy with it. There's so much growth in online, so they're just if the market grows 20%, they're really happy with like getting that 20% market share and keeping that. But you actually you took a big stab at this market, and you gained a lot of market share, and we believe and hope it's through your powers of experimentation. So that's why we invited you today. You've been really successful. Congratulations on your work.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's true. It's been a great year when it comes to that. Even it's been a bit boring to sit at home work mostly, but yeah. And
The results have been good.
the results have been good, and we have done a lot when it comes to improving how we work with these questions as well.
So I would. I guess the first thing that we would like to see that. So now we have you here. You have your opinion, your ideas about what makes a successful experimentation. We have Hasidjer, who just gave us your view. You're backed on your data. So what is the audience saying, Matilda? What are people out there saying today in terms of like what are the key success factors for experimentation?
Yeah, very good question, and the answers are quite like different, but there's one thing that really summarizes, and that is good hypothesis.
Yeah.
So really having the data-driven approach to creating hypothesis, that's one of the key factors. But also there's a lot of like discussion regarding data quality and curiosity to really provide the success factors. Is there something you agree with, Martin, the hypothesis?
Yeah, I do. But when I saw the question and I was thinking about it, the first that came to mind to me was the autonomy of the CRO team.
Right.
And I think that's been a very big success factor for us. That
Autonomy.
autonomy,
Yeah,
the autonomous team. with a cross-functional team that can make decisions and to enable good speed in the testing program.
Right. Okay. And would you agree, Hazidir? So now we came up. You had your key success factors, and now we came up here with data quality and good hypothesis plus autonomy for the CRO team. Would that fit on into your model of what you've seen in your research?
Absolutely. We didn't share it today, but we actually have data that proves that the better your analytics tooling, the more likely you are to succeed. Okay. So actually, people who have simple analytics, think of like Google Analytics, Adobe, their tests win about 30% more often. When they upgrade to what I would call like advanced UX analytics, think about like a full story or a content score or quantum metrics, their success rate goes up an additional 20%. And so the better the data that you have, the better the hypotheses you can generate. And I think that's really critical because most people's default mode of testing, I always say it's like, good people who are great at testing, they're like doctors. They diagnose the disease, they know the problems, they look at the data, they know what to fix. People who are bad at testing, they break into their neighbor's apartment, look in the medicine cabinet and say, oh, he's taking these pills, maybe I should take them too. Most people simply look at what other people have tried for their own diseases, but they don't actually know if it applies to them. And so the better the data that you have, the better you can diagnose and apply the right hypotheses. That's the place where a lot of people struggle. They steal other people's medicine instead of diagnosing their own diseases.
Good. That's very good. So now we have zombie meetings and breaking into the medicine cabinet. Like we have metaphor takeaways here at the the CJAM sessions today. So Hazidir said that like one of the key part of your presentation was the number of variations that you use in each test. So I'd like to ask you, Martin, has this been a success factor for you, actually increasing the number of variations in testing? Has this been a focus for you? And in that case, how have you been able to do that?
Well, we've been doing a lot of multi-variation tests, and I think that those are, or I know that those are more often likely to win.
Okay, so you're confirming Hazidir's point of view?
Part of it, but I also think it's those just clean A/B tests have been important for us as well when it comes to testing in parts of the site there are not so much traffic and you want fast results, or if you want to reverse testing something, let's say a function or something that was added before, long before. We have had our site for a long time, and there are old stuff that we want to try to remove some eventually, and those
testing.
And like that, I think it's been successful with just making a quick removal of something, and that's enough with an A/B test there, I think.
So you touched on one thing there. You said like parts of the site where you don't have much traffic, you can do simpler tests, and then in other parts of the site where you have more traffic, you can have more variations. So I think that's a very good answer, because a lot of people in Sweden, they would argue like, oh, you can talk about that, but it's just an American company. It's theory because we don't have that much traffic in Sweden. But so you're basically saying, what I hear now is that you're saying like, look at the traffic across your site and then basically try to maximize the number of variations in a different area where you can do that. Something like that.
Yeah, something like that, or at least you have to see when you set up a test how big traffic is that. We have quite a big site, and one of the largest in Sweden when it comes to e-commerce and visitors. So we're fortunate there that we can get quick results, but not on all parts of a site. So I think that's part of the. When you set up a test and you do the pre-analytics to see what results you expect, then you have to consider that.
That's it. I'd like to touch on a second thing here. You said that an important thing is the access to tech and dev resources, because the more lines of code you can get in, so you have a lot of muscle, you have a lot of power in tech and development. You said that was important. Would you agree with that, Martin? Have you focused on that?
We had not necessarily in number of heads, but in the attention that we get the resources that we need for that. We have our in-house tech team, so we're not dependent on external consultants when it comes to that, and that I think that's a good thing for us.
Did you have to have a battle to get those resources? Was it a tough one?
If you look over a time period of 2 years, it's been a bit of a struggle, but I think we are there now, pretty much. And I also think that we are in a position where most of the company understands and have seen the results of a good A/B testing program.
Right.
Because to be honest, we haven't had that so long. We've
No.
been active building it for the last 2 years or so, but in this form that we have now. But the last year, it's really been resultful, and that makes it easier to ask for the resources you need in the.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, as we are built up, we have. I talked about an autonomous team, and so we work with a cross-functional team where we have UX and we have a tech, a developer and a product owner and Scrum Master, and we have all those. And so I think we are pretty well set up for the test program that we have right now.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And I would maybe we should go to the questions from the audience. Do you have a favorite one there?
I have a favorite one. We talked a little bit about variations. You talked about you're doing a multivariate test, and then you made these like quick fixes, more easier A/B tests. And due to that question, we have this old truth that Anantini asked here, that you shouldn't test you should just test one thing at a time. Right, and not do multiple changes at a time. So on that topic, is that an old truth, or how would you answer to that?
I think it's true, but you have to sometimes you keep multiple tests on the site, but you need to be very careful to see how they affect each other. And a part of that is also if you get a winning test. And that's also part of the tech question. How much attention can you get from the development team? Is how fast can you get the winning test out to 100%? I mean, we could also always pull up the A/B testing tool, but we want to implement it in the code, and that is also something that makes it a bit difficult sometimes. Is if we need to get all the winning tests out as fast as possible to not to get the right influence, so to speak.
Is that a bottleneck for you, setting tests live?
It has been, yes. But we have worked around it by turning up the knob to 100% in the A/B testing tool. But I don't think that's the super way to do it, even though those tools are good now. But it has been.
Depending on your test quota, you can also easily consume all your test quota by doing that if you have an external tool.
Yeah, you could do that. Though we have an internal tool right now.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think it's a success factor that to get. I mean, if we have a winning test, you need to every day you're not putting it out at 100% on the site. That's a losing day.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I think that is also a success factor.
Yeah, that's a mindset.
Yeah.
We see a lot of clients that have winning tests, but then there's a huge bottleneck in actually pushing stuff live.
Yeah.
So they can have a result that they know is going to yield an uplift, and then it just sits around for 6 months and nothing happens. So that could also be that's a very, very important factor to work on.
Yes, and I mean we do have problems like that sometimes too. Depends on the test and how complicated it is and so on. But I think we're getting better and better.
Thank you for joining, Martin. Thank you for joining Hazardgear.
Thank you.
We just have a few minutes left, and for all of you out there, I know that you want to meet the mad conversion scientist and see what he's cooked up today. So with that, thank you very much for coming here to Stockholm, Martin, and good luck with your future experimentation. I bet it's going to rock. And thank you, Hazardgear, for joining us from Amsterdam. And remember to send us the link to that place where you buy your curtains so we can all get them. Yeah.
I will. Thanks for
Thank you very much, everybody, for this.
Okay, here we are again. Final thing, the mad conversion scientist is back, and he brought us, until this day, the funnel visualization glasses. Maybe Matilda, you want to put them on so we can see, for those that didn't see that. Can you see the funnel now?
Yeah, wow, it's amazing.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah. It is crazy. How does it look? Is it good?
Yeah, you look great.
Okay,
yeah,
perfect,
very red.
yeah.
And here's there's the conversion magnet that automatically pulls the conversions like this towards the conversion goal. But now you got something new for us today. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's the, what is that?
It's a multifunctional buy now button. It's a very effective invention, I'd say.
It's a very big button, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and how does it work then?
Well, it's a buy now button. So you press it and then you buy whatever you want to buy.
And what is it? And how do I know what I'm buying?
Well, the thing you're thinking of is what you're buying.
So it's like connected to your brain?
Sort of. There's a bit more depth involved, of course, in how it functions.
So you think of something, and then you push it, and then whatever you're thinking of comes to you, or how does it work?
Yeah, well, yeah. Then you buy it, and then an order gets placed, and it gets sent home to you.
It's like it's amazing. How does it? Can we look inside? There must be some pretty cool technology.
Oh yes. So actually, it is utilizing. Inside here we have a little quantum computer, and we're utilizing what Einstein referred to as spooky interaction at a distance, where we actually entangle the qubits with the neurons in the brain in order to properly assert what your desire is when you interact with the
I'm sorry, my brain just melted. I can't digest that. It's very
that's amazing.
Yeah, but like I'm thinking one thing. If you don't want to buy something but just want to like get something, like you want to start a subscription, could you? Because I was thinking
build the buy now button.
Yeah, but I was thinking like maybe you can. I have a click here call to action instead. Maybe you can A/B test that. Would you? Is it difficult to? I don't know.
In theory, like it does read your brain, but it was you told me to build a buy now button.
Well, I was just thinking maybe it would be good to A/B test. I mean, we work with experimentation after all.
Yeah, that would be very good.
But okay, never mind. So if I want this, okay, how do I get it?
Oh, you press buy now and you order it.
I just heard something run down here.
Yeah.
Is that the curtains? That we talked about before, the curtains.
Yeah, maybe.
They're here.
You're thinking about the curtains.
You were thinking about the
they're
curtains.
already here.
I couldn't let that go.
I want to buy this button. So how do I buy it?
Well, you press buy now.
Yeah, but like if I don't have it, how can I press it?
Well, my thinking was that you press buy now and then you order it.
Yeah, but you can't. It's a kind of a catch-22 here, right, Patrick? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're gonna have to go back to the lab on this one. Like, we appreciate the stuff that you brought for us, but like, could you just? I mean, I appreciate your work. You're not gonna lose your job, but this is like this doesn't cut it, right? You need to figure this one out. Sorry, you're bringing out these gadgets, but it has to have better quality. Okay, the whole process needs to be thought through. Okay, next time. Like step up your game. Yeah, okay.
We'll be back next time.
Yeah, we will.
We had a question from the audience. How can we get in touch with you if we want to learn more about you build this stuff? Do you have the lab here?
We could do another one. Get in touch button.
Get in touch button. Yeah, we'll print that and put it.
Yeah, that's very good.
Or you can ask in the chat maybe.
Okay.
So you're not fired, but you're under surveillance. Yeah. Okay. So everybody. You still have the chance. We have one more session. You still have the chance to get a gadget like this. We have 3 of them. There's an open spot for the last session. So whatever you want, you email us at cjam@conversionista.com, or you post on our social media like LinkedIn, Facebook, or our Instagram account, and then you just wish for. Is it happening? No. So thank you everybody for joining today. I want to say thank you to our amazing speakers, to our partner Optimizely, who helped us get this happening today. I want to say thank you to Matilda. Thank you for joining for the first time. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Martin, back there in the, in the back from NetOnNet, and also finally to the crew here at the park that made this possible today. Next week, on the 2nd of December, we're going to be hosting the final session, which will be about growing your user insight landscape. We got Erin Wiegel, former head of the customer experience at Booking.com, now at Deliveroo in a senior role there, and Terry Pierelli, a freelance CRO consultant. So we're going to be talking about, like, when you're focused on gathering user insights, we always tend to go down the same path of user tests and maybe putting up Hotjar or full story. But they have been thinking about, like, if we think outside of the box, what are other areas that we can grow the number of insights we can get from users? So they're going to come up with 2 different techniques that I'm almost pretty sure that you never heard of and didn't even think about, and now you're going to get extra insight from those two areas. So that'll be, I'm really looking forward to this last session of the CJAM Sessions. And with that, thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, everybody.
And bye.
Bye-bye.